In this lesson, we'll look at a few different methods for creating new topology in ZBrush. So just like in Mudbox, we can use an automatic function in ZBrush to automatically calculate new topology. We can also use a couple of manual methods to create new topology. One of these is using Z-spheres, which has been around for quite a while. And how you would do that is you take your mesh, and this is 12 begin. We would make sure and load it up, but we would select a Z-sphere, or in edit mode, go to Tools, our tool palette, go down to Rigging, select Mesh, and we would select the mesh that we want to add the new topology for. That'll bring it in as kind of a ghost here. We'll go down to Topology, and now we want to edit topology. Now at this point, what we can do is start to drop in points on our mesh, and you can see that they're actually connected as we click through here. They lie on the surface of our mesh, and we would use these as our new topology. So we could come in and start to connect these up. To click on an existing edge, we would hit Control, click, and then click on the existing edge. To start again, Control, click, and we can start to come in here again, Control, click, start a new line, come in here, break that one, and we start to create our kind of cage. In this case, I'm just creating a little section on the shoulder just by coming in and completing this from point to point. To see what the mesh will look like, you can hit A, and that gives you an indication. Now this has got a subdivision level on it, and it hasn't projected anything through. You can also come in here with Move and start to move some of your points around a little bit on your mesh. Sometimes you have to clear the mask for that. There we go. And start to move these points around a little bit. And in this way, we can start to create new topology for our mesh. Now, if we turn off Edit Topology, you can see the mesh here. This allows us to save it. We can save out the Z tool, come back in, turn on Edit Topology. When we're done, if we created our mesh over the whole creature, we could just make a new adaptive skin out of that, and that can be our new base. Okay. Another method of creating topology is to use the topology brush, and this is going to be like in Mudbox where we use curves to create that. It's going to be the same kind of thing where we go in, choose the topology brush. Topology brush only works on a mesh that doesn't have subdivision levels, so we can go ahead and duplicate this Z tool, and let's take our subdivision levels. We'll delete all the lower levels. And now, kind of in the same way, we can come in and begin to draw across here. And this topology is going to be created just like in Mudbox. It's kind of the intersection of these curves. So create curves going that way, and then we can start to come down this way. And you can see where those potential faces have been highlighted. If we hit Alt and drag, we can get rid of all those extra lines coming out. And then we click on the support mesh, we can create that mesh. And you can create meshes that have no thickness based on the draw size, take that all the way down, or you can create meshes that have thickness, just depending on what your draw size is. That's what drives it. Okay. And now this is part of that same mesh, but it's masked out. So what we can do is say split, and we can say split masked points. That allows us to split this out. So now we've got this, and this is now separated out. We can deal with this as its own thing. All right. We've also got an automatic function in ZBrush to be able to do this, and that is called zRemesher. So to use that, let's go ahead and go down to Geometry. zRemesher is what we want to open up. Now, there's a lot of options in here, from going from this zRemesher button all the way down to the Modify Topology section. So it comes right down to Use Polypaint. So what we can do is we can freeze the mesh border and the polygroups border, which doesn't mean too much to you right now. Polygroups are just an organization or a group of specific polygons that allows us to select things in certain ways. The target polygon count allows us to tell ZBrush what we'd like to shoot for. Now, if this adaptive density is turned on, it's going to go above this target polygon count because it's going to try to make sure and match all of the shapes as best it can. So we can set this down to 4,000 or so. But if we have this adaptive on, it's not going to hit that 4,000. It's going to allow it to go above that. Okay. We also have curve strength, which is based on curves. If we want the kind of guides to be able to follow, we can draw those in. Those are going to be found here under Z remesher guides, and we can just kind of draw these in. If we have, we want the polygons to sort of flow in a specific way, we can use these. And then this curve strength allows us to tell ZBrush how much influence do we want to have, do we want those curves to have over what it is we're doing. We can also use polypaint to drive the density of our mesh. So that's kind of selected here based on this color, and you can see that one side is blue, this sort of teal, and another side is red. So based on that, we can decide how much density will actually be added. So if we want to have more dense polygons, we can come in, and let's fill it with white. If we want to have more density in certain areas, we can come in and kind of paint this through. We want to have less density on areas back here. Change this, there we go. We can come in and paint that through. There we go. Through on the head here real quickly. So let's go ahead and just run ZRemesher the way it is. So hit the button. It's going to go through that process using adaptive with the settings that we've added and the guides that we added. Just like you can add curves in Mudbox and change the influence of those curves, these curves have an effect on kind of guiding the new topology and what direction it needs to go. So we'll let that go ahead and think for a moment. So here you can see, and we did it in a pretty exaggerated way, but it's pretty clear that in those areas that we painted, it created a much lower resolution versus in the areas up here, it created a much higher resolution. And because of that, we had so low here and so high here, you have this sort of making a transition between those. So, you want to blend that together and kind of make it a little bit nicer, but you can see how the topology flows along the shapes that we had here. So it gives us a good base again to work from. Let's take a look at the poly count. So it's about 15,000. So again, it did overshoot our target quite a bit, but it used that adaptive setting to go ahead and make it, exactly the way that it felt it could make it to match the shape and also to minimize the number of polygons to be able to get the effect that we want. And we also had a bunch of polygons that we had to use up on the face because we painted in using polypaint. So then it had to redistribute those across the surface. So just out of the box, it can give you a very good result. You can go back in and do it again. Maybe this time we don't use the polypaint, and come back in and get a different result. And so this can be a good way to kind of recreate your base geometry, make it a little bit, maybe a little bit cleaner there. And so you can see how that's done a really great job of kind of finding those shapes, making those polygons flow in the right directions. So that's ZRemesher. Again, you can use a topology brush as well to create custom topology. ZRemesher will do the same thing as kind of retopologize in Mudbox, and you have the ability to create those same kind of curves, guide curves, using the ZRemesher guides. So in the next lesson, we'll take a look at posing in ZBrush. So it's going to be there are going to be some similarities to working in Mudbox and some differences, and so we'll talk about